Hi, it's a quick video for Andrew Jebb and Jonathan McElveen in advance of the trial on Monday. Just a few submissions I'd like to make in evidence, specifically in relation to the allegations of mis-selling that I'm facing. I'd like to give you a brief synopsis of what I'd like to express to the jury, and I'd like you to give my evidential submissions serious consideration before we meet on Friday for conference. As you know, the companies that I've had have spent a great deal of money purchasing lists of telephone preference service screened businesses who'd agreed to receive marketing calls. In the case of Macmillan Design, just under £47,000 between 2014 and 2015. In the case of Windows Media, obviously, just under £48,000 between 2011 and 2012, I believe. What I'd like to express to the jury is that my company received complaints and inquiries as a direct result of buying these TPS screened lists. We bought these TPS screened lists in good faith from several different marketing companies, and unfortunately we soon realised that the lists were also being sold to a multitude of different sales companies. For example, Scottish Power, British Gas, accountancy firms looking for new business, solicitors firms looking for people who'd had accidents in the last 3 or 4 years, etc, etc. Now, in the first instance, that caused a minority of complaints. For example, when a customer had placed an order with us, 5 or 6 days later we'd go to call them back to chase up their artwork or their invoice, but they'd become very unresponsive and aggressive with us in some cases because they've been inundated with marketing calls from various different companies. Battling against the gas and electricity companies, though, isn't the big issue here. The real problem we had was when we realised that these marketing companies were selling the lists to rival companies who are working in the same industry sector as us, people selling emergency services themed magazines. In the first instance, this would cause problems, small problems, like, for example, when a customer placed an order with us, they might receive a second call from another company selling the same thing 10 minutes later, become confused between the two, think it was the same thing, and inadvertently place a second order without realising it. When those customers received 2 invoices for what they thought was one service, they would complain, cancel, and these were a minority of complaints, though, and they were easily dealt with by cancelling or refunding the customers. What I'd really like to get across to the jury is the fact that we soon discovered that these rival companies were actively telling people that we were a scam. When a rival salesperson came across one of our orders on the lists of businesses they were calling, they would deliberately tell them that we were a scam in order to steal the order off us, or to get the order cancelled with us and cause a complaint for us, in order to try and bully us away from using these lists. Now, there are several calls. Here's an example I would like you to give consideration to submit in evidence for the jury so they can hear what we were up against. So this call was made by me in 2014 at Macmillan Design Limited. So first and foremost, this is one I'd like you to have a listen to.
Hi, is that Nick? It is. Oh, hi mate, it's Nick Williams here. I'm just calling from the graphic designers for Watchdog magazine. I believe you were contacted by somebody regarding...
Yeah, somebody rang up yesterday claiming to be from a magazine offering the same thing as you. Now, my business partner took the call. He rang me back straight away. He said they said that Watchdog magazine, they said the advert that you bought is a scam. So we've been looking into it today because...
As you can hear from that call, and as I would like the jury to hear from that call, that particular customer had been told by somebody that we were a scam. When this happened, customers would become very, very aggressive with us. They would send us really nasty messages in some cases containing expletives. They would phone us up and warn us that they were going to contact Trading Standards or the police. So I think this is a very important part of my case. I'd like you to have a look through this link here and pick some select calls that I could possibly play to the jury after your consideration and consultation on Friday. I feel these calls are of the utmost importance to explain to the jury what we were up against and to explain a small amount of the complaints that we had. Now, well, in fact, a lot of the complaints we had, I should say. Now, another thing I'd like to explain to the jury is the fact that when I was working at Hamilton Square, one of these rival publishers called me up and threatened to start writing anonymous posts about me online in order to cause problems for my company if I didn't stop using the lists. Sure enough, I started seeing anonymous posts left, right and centre online, and this caused further cancellations and complaints for me. Now, the reason I'd like to explain that to the jury is because I often had to rebrand the company over the last 15 years. When I felt the complaints or the anonymous posts online were pushing my level of complaints above sort of 1% of my customers, I felt like I had to rebrand. So I had to create a new magazine or a new company name to get away from the negative posts, because I was afraid the company would go bust if these anonymous postings online were to snowball. This again is a very important part of the case, and I could explain this by obviously showing Watchdog magazine and saying that this magazine was rebranded 3 times in the space of 2 years. Watchdog magazine became Stay Safe magazine, Stay Safe magazine became Frontline magazine, and Frontline magazine eventually became The Beat magazine. Finally, another thing I'd like you to consider is obviously I accept that in certain cases, because I was recruiting people I didn't know, that customers were called by reps of mine who were mis-selling. Unfortunately, it was it did happen. It was unavoidable. I did my utmost to control any mis-selling in my company, and I always obviously threatened people with the sack and would immediately sack them if they continued to mis-sell in my company. Now, the thing I'd like you to consider is I do have a selection of calls here which show what my reps were saying to people on the phone, how they described themselves on the phone. I always taught them to say they were calling from the name of the magazine, for example, Watchdog magazine, Stay Safe magazine, Frontline magazine, etc. And you can hear that from this selection of calls. Perhaps you could also give consideration to these set of calls and perhaps pick a select few that you think we could use to express my story to the jury. That's all I can think of for the video at the moment. I will send an accompanying email and various other points, but yeah, my main concern is that we get these calls submitted so the jury can see what was really going on. Thanks very much for listening. I look forward to seeing you on Friday.